We acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we, as beneficiaries of the treaty, must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, we do not have a supplementary agenda this evening. Rules of decorum at the council meeting. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere of inclusiveness, integrity, civility, fairness, and respects for differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disturbs, disrupts, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statements, or hate speech, defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public may result in removal from the premises. This also applies to deputations. We ask that you do not approach members of council if they are seated in their council seats, and the public, unless invited, is not permitted to come into the gated horseshoe area. The use of posters, signage, and literature is also prohibited. For attendance this evening, we have 3 councillors participating virtually. Councillor Story, Councillor McDonald, and Councillor Thompson are all on the virtual call this evening, and the rest are in the room. There are no disclosures of pecuniary interest for the open session agenda items, and we'll now move on to the recognitions. Our first recognition is of the Buxton Next Generation, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Crew.
As February is Black History Month, we are proud to recognize a group that is preserving and promoting the rich history and culture of Buxton by engaging young people connected to the community. Buxton's Next Generation, or BNG as it's sometimes called, started in 2003 with a $500 donation from Bonnie and Mike Robbins. Proceeds from that donation were used to sponsor the first ever Party in the Park during the annual homecoming celebration in Buxton, and the group has grown from there. With most members being direct descendants of enslaved people who came to the Elgin settlement in search of freedom, Buxton's Next Generation celebrate and raise awareness about the vital role in that community has played in shaping Chatham-Kent and Canadian history. The group helps to plan and host Buxton's annual homecoming, which brings over 4,000 people to the community to celebrate and honor Buxton's rich heritage through music, sports, and fun activities. On behalf of the municipality of Chatham-Kent Council, we are pleased to recognize Buxton's Next Generation for their important contributions to our community. So, with us today, we have Michelle Robbins, Cameron Dudley, Layla Bardella, Rebecca Smith, and Heather Robbins.
Like a tweaker.
The next recognition we have this evening is our artist feature. It is for Candice Fung, and her art is sitting behind Michael Dubin, leaning against the wall there, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Allen.
Candice Fung moved to Chatham-Kent from London in 2000 with her son when her husband Elliot, who is now a teacher at John McGregor Secondary School, accepted a job at Southwestern Regional Centre. She was employed by Landfill District School Board for over 20 years. It was her privilege to work with many incredible students and staff. Her art, mainly portrait, is focused on representation, identity, change, growth, strength, dignity, and beauty. It is her belief that recognizing the dignity of all is integral for human connection, especially during these difficult times. This piece, entitled A Labor of Love, Love's Labor Lost, is general and specific, personal and public, academic and craft, historical, current, and looks to Afrofuturism. It also conflates her love of literature, visual arts, and education. Rather than explaining the personal and academic, here is a brief description of media and the public aspect of the work, contextually bound by the month of February, Black History Month. This is a 6 feet by 2 feet mixed media piece. This is still a work in progress. It is a pastiche, collage, and gouache paint and technological support with references from the internet and Procreate use to explore visual representation of ideas. In terms of the public and specific, we look at the past historical figures included: Mary Ann Shadd, Mary Angelique of the Canadian 2025 stamp, a portrait of a racialized Black woman, Catherine, by Albert Durer, and Black Canadian historians Shannon Prince, Natasha Henry, and Angela Davis. We look at the current and replicated newer release stamp of Mary Angelique, who is on the New Canadian stamp. Afua Cooper writes about her in her book and in a poem which I used for many years teaching English. Irma Isaac, Vivian Kalinko, and a stylist version of Black women from JY Portrait Challenge represent today. The Daily Portrait Challenge marks the time. This portrait, along with Angela Davis at the top, are future-looking, imagining and maintaining hope during difficult times. Hope, imagination, dreaming, and reimagining are central to positive social change, of which this symbolizes. As it is February, Black History Month, it is difficult to think of the plight of many Black women, past, present, and future, and the precarious ground they walk, especially with Canada's inextricable connection with the United States, and the many attacks on hard-won civil rights, DIA, and fair employment. These women are connected, models of strength, beauty, and love. Bell Hooks writes all about love. How is it a radical act, a personal and public act, an essential action and feeling that is essential in recognizing everyone's humanity? This is a celebration of strength, beauty, achievement, calling all to engage in the labor of love that just may answer our existential quest for meaning. Maybe the meaning and lesson in life is love of self, other, and humanity.
Mr. Mayor, I understand that Candice couldn't be present this evening.
Oh. That's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Next, we'll move on to deputations. This evening, Council, you were forwarded 14 deputations for this evening. First of all, the emailed ones only who are not present tonight. We have 16D, motion of Councillor Wright regarding the divestment of Clearville Park. We've received deputations from Larry Garside, who noted in his deputation that he is a municipal employee, Lynn Van Manen, Mark Oche, Nicole Duncan, Stuart Thompson, Will and Linda Parney, and Doug and Linda Ford. Emailed also for 17A, 55 Croydon Street, Chatham, demolition is from Stan Mazpa. And also emailed for this evening on 15A, ward boundary and council composition review by Jackie Beattie. We have no deputations on the Zoom call this evening. And present this evening, we have 5 deputations. The first one we'll call upon is on 15A, ward boundary and council composition review. We'll call up Jim Brackett. I'll remind all deputations this evening that you will have a maximum of 5 minutes and the timer will be on the screen. If you'd like to come forward now, Mr. Brackett. On deck will be items for 16D, the motion of Councillor Wright regarding the divestment of Clearville Park. We'll have Suzanne Spence-Wilkins, Christy Coatsworth, Daryl Casey, and Jim Giffen. Welcome, Mr. Brackett.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm representing the Kent Federation of Agriculture regarding 15A, ward boundary and council composition. Strategy Corps presented its final report on December 16th. At that time, the council asked them to review the ward boundaries for a council of 15. Based on their work, they have outlined 3 options tonight, 2 for a council of 15, 14 councillors plus mayor, and a fallback of 18. Falling back to 18 would be basically very little change from what we have now. Strategy Corps' preferred option is option 1, which involves 5 county wards with 1 or 2 councillors each, and 3 Chatham wards with 2 councillors each. Their second choice is 6 county wards with 1 or 2 councillors and 3 Chatham wards with 2 councillors each. Their fallback position would, as I said before, would be 18, with some change to 3 wards in Ward 6 instead of 6 councillors in 1 ward, Ward 6, having 3 wards instead. Chatham-Kent is the only municipality in Ontario with 17 councillors, 1 mayor for a total of 18. After attending the Strategy Corps meetings and reading tonight's review from Strategy Corps, I find Strategy Corps to have done a very comprehensive job. We, Kent Federation of Agriculture, would like to support option 1 as recommended by Strategy Corps, with option 2 as our second choice. The Kent Federation of Agriculture believes that option 1, a council of 15 with 3 wards in former Ward 6, would give all Chatham-Kent the most comprehensive representation of the options available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brockett. Next speaker is with regards to 16D, the motion of Councillor Wright regarding the divestment of Clearville Park. First speaker is Suzanne Spence-Wilkins. On deck is Christy Coatsworth.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, administration, and guests. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about the future of Clearville Park. A couple of weeks ago, when I heard the park might be put up for sale without any public consultation, I knew I needed to act. I'm concerned that some people see only dollar signs while I see lots of opportunity. I've been thinking for quite some time that as a municipality, we needed to renew the vision for this valuable public property, because frankly, it has been on a downhill slide. It's been sad to see what has been let go, like the store, on-site management, and the final degradation that the well-built public washrooms have had their doors boarded over for years. Now a porta-john sits in front of the brick building for anyone using the public lake access or picnic pavilion. That's a hard one. I think we can all agree that Clearville Park is not being managed with a vision for sustainability and vitality. We need to work together to make that happen rather than sell a public space that benefits the many so that it can be owned by a few. Once a treasured public access like the lake to the lake is lost, it will never be recovered. The money from the park's potential sale should not be eyed as a solution to other budgetary problems. Solve those issues by tackling the income or expenses in those departments, not by selling something that belongs to the people. For 7 generations, my family has benefited from this lake access. Since it became a park, we have enjoyed camping, fishing, ice cream at the store, family reunions at the pavilion, time on the beach, hiking in the forest, tobogganing on the hill, and watching wildlife and birds. My family is not uncommon in Orford Township. Clear Creek and Clearville are at the center of our story, from First Nations to settlers to today. Tonight, I want to discuss how Clearville Park fits into the bigger picture of the area. Its 80 acres connect to Clear Creek Forest Provincial Park that is owned by the Nature Conservancy of Canada and maintained through an agreement with Ontario Parks. Together, it's over 1,000 acres of forest, of recreational land with public access to the lakeshore. What an opportunity to promote the municipality as a place that residents and tourists have an access to such a valuable natural resource. Last Friday, I spoke with the Ontario representative of the Nature Conservancy. She had not been informed about this potential loss of the neighboring public land. She had only a few details from a newspaper article. It was her opinion that the Nature Conservancy would be very interested in this park remaining under the public ownership and planned to speak with Ontario Parks. She would like to be informed of the details of tonight's meeting. It's my understanding that the future major expense for the trailer park might have brought this sale issue to the forefront. I'm not familiar with the details, but I believe camping is a vital part of the park. I think that the trailer park business plan needs guidance and support to thrive. At Rondeau Park, located just a few kilometers away, the campsites are often sold out. Other private and public campgrounds appear to be thriving, so Clearville should be as well. The park needs to be managed and promoted, not sold. With guidance, Clearville Park could comfortably support more visitors and reap the financial awards. Birding, hiking, fishing, swimming, and relaxing by the lake are popular in many local parks. For instance, Point Pelee National Park had over 400,000 visitors last year. I'm not suggesting that Clearville can support that number of guests, but I think it is reasonable to assume that it could attract many more than it does now. It can't be expected to flourish without a vision. I believe Clearville Park should remain a public land with free access to the lake. It's a rough-cut gem that could become a shining jewel for the residents and tourists alike. If the municipality of Chatham-Kent won't work with the residents of East Kent and our guests to create a unique natural reserve that combines free access with reasonable income, then they should allow us to take back our property and find another organization or government that will help us to preserve and protect this land. The municipality does not have the right to sell our heritage or our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Christy Coatsworth. On deck is Daryl Casey.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, administration, and the public. I speak to support the motion of Councillor John Wright on public consultations concerning the future of Clearville Park. Free access to public shoreline is a precious commodity. A former CK councillor says, "One of the first things I was told by an experienced councillor was the importance of maintaining public access to our natural resources, especially water." Our history all across Ontario has been to limit access. Not everyone has access to waterfront. There should be more, not less, access, end quote. My son, who is a planner in Nova Scotia, states, "You never sell waterfront property. Once it's gone, you'll never be able to afford it again." Lake Erie supports one of the largest freshwater fisheries in the world. With its shallow basins and warm water to nurture fish life, the hardworking commercial fishers of Wheatley and Erie and recreational sports fishers thrive. Lake Erie is a signature feature of what makes Chatham-Kent. How do we access this tremendous resource today? Wheatley's Erie Street South ends at public lakeshore. Access is open without washrooms or picnic tables. At Wheatley Provincial Park, people can drive in for summer rates of $21 a day, $16.75 for seniors. There are picnic tables, shelters, washrooms, trails. Overnight camping fees range from about $20 at the disabled rate to $60. No campsites have a lake view. Rondeau Provincial Park offers the same amenities as Wheatley at the same prices. Erie offers a well-maintained municipal public beach with picnic tables, a shelter with change rooms and washrooms, playground. There are no public overnight options. It's free. Terrace Beach on Rose Line has been Howard Township's public lakeshore, free access with porta-johns in the summer. Clearville Park offers the best day use opportunities of all. There's a beach and a boat launch. The picnic table shelter is equipped with sides to close to windy weather. Doors to complete washrooms remained screwed shut since the pandemic, replaced with summertime porta-johns. There are woodland paths. Children can use playground equipment. The trailer park offers that rare feature, a lake view. Overnight camping costs $25 if the obscure online information is correct. Clearview is small, complete, and for day use, free. From Wheatley to Clearville is an 86-kilometer stretch with 6 public access areas on the lake. There are just 3 with toilets that are free. Clearville is one. The opportunity to access these resources is owed to all our citizens, not only those with ample disposable income. The current economy feels shaky. Costs of living stretch, sometimes to breaking. Time spent in nature, green space, and open water is time that calms the wearied soul. We all understand that truth. These are times to share with each other, not to take away. Today, our community in Chatham-Kent is under stress. Witness recent movements to break away from Chatham-Kent. Far from growing our community, we will do well to maintain it. Clearville Park represents the best that Orford has contributed to our amalgamated municipality. It has stood as a public resource for more than 200 years. Think of that, from the War of 1812, through the Mackenzie and Fenian uprisings, through Confederation, 2 world wars to today. The park's facilities were developed with care by a committee of local people over the years, supported by Township Council. Marketing, care, and maintenance have declined. Throwing away the contribution of Orford to Chatham-Kent to save costs will only fuel the fire of alienation that is sweeping through the municipality. Through all the years of crises that Canada and pre-Confederation Canada has endured, to call the 2025 budget a crisis necessitating the sale of the legacy at Clearville begs the question, what are we made of? As for the environment, we know that Chatham-Kent has among the lowest rates of tree cover in Ontario. We cannot sell 80 acres of woodland. Still less can we consider sale of woodland which fronts the lake. The Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority has worked for years to increase plantings in the watersheds, filtering water to hard-pressed Lake Erie. The park must not only be maintained but restored. I urge you to support Councillor Wright's motion, and I ask that information to the community include revenue and expenses statement for the past 5 years at Clearville and any other data on Clearville property, past or proposed, available to administration and council. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Daryl Casey. On deck is Jim Giffen.
Honorable Mayor and esteemed members of City Council, my name is Daryl Casey. I am here with Rick Arson and Jim Barnes. We are the elected officials of the campers, over the 100 families that are campers at Clearville Park. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today on an issue of great importance to our community, the future of Clearville Park. Clearville Park is not just a piece of land. Sorry if I get emotional. It's a living testament to our region's rich history, tracing its roots back to the original fishing villages of the early 20th century. This park has been a cornerstone of Chatham-Kent for generations. Families have gathered here for decades, creating memories that span multiple lifetimes. To consider selling this park is to erase a vital part of our heritage and the very fabric of what makes our community unique. Beyond its historical significance, Clearville Park serves a critical role in the social well-being of many of our residents, particularly those aged 50 to 80. In a time when many municipalities are struggling to create spaces that foster social engagement for older adults, we've already achieved that at Clearville Park. It is a place where friendships are formed, activities promote healthy living, and residents stay engaged with their community. The sale of this park would dismantle this success story, leaving a void that cannot be easily filled. But let's also talk about the people who call Clearville Park home. During the summer months, these are not just seasonal visitors. They are teachers, first responders, policemen, retired fire, paramedics, business owners, and retirees. They are the very individuals who dedicated their lives to serving this community, including myself, retired principal for 18 years. This park provides them with a place to recharge, reconnect, and build long-lasting relationships. Selling the park would not only take away a treasured sanctuary, but would also shatter the camaraderie that has been cultivated over the years. I urge you to consider what we stand to lose. The sale of Clearville Park is not just a financial transaction. It is a decision that affects generations of families, a cherished community of dedicated residents, a history that deserves to be preserved. Let us unite in our shared responsibility to preserve this irreplaceable treasure for the future of Chatham-Kent. We implore you to collaborate with our committee to find a solution that benefits everyone, a path that ensures Clearville Park remains open for generations to come. This park is more than just land. It is our cherished sanctuary, a hub of connection, a piece of our community's soul. Our committee is not just seeking a partner. We're looking to you to seek a champion to help us. One that will stand by and protect and maintain this beloved gem, ensuring its beauty and purpose to endure for years to come. Thank you for your time. The residents of Clearville Park.
Thank you. And the final speaker is Jim Giffen.
Good evening, Mayor Caniff, councillors, and administration. Your Municipal Heritage Committee respectfully asks Council to reconsider the divestment of Clearville Park based on its cultural heritage importance to the community. Ontario is abundant with forgotten towns and villages established by early pioneers and settlers, and Clearville Park is all that remains of the former village of Clearville, a bustling community of approximately 300 residents that stretched from Talbot Road to Lake Erie. The initial settlement was located where the park is situated now. This area is of significant cultural heritage importance to Chatham-Kent, and Clearville Park has been selected to receive an historic plaque from the Chatham-Kent Heritage Network in 2025 to commemorate its historic value, and your Municipal Heritage Committee has added it to the list of properties to consider for a heritage designation under the Ontario Heritage Act, as it exceeds the minimum requirements to be designated as a heritage site. The Provincial Planning Statement 2024 states in part, protected heritage property which may contain built heritage resources or cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. The park is one of, if not the oldest area in CK used as a park for well over 100 years. The area dates back to 1812 when the shore near the current dock was likely used as an unloading point for supplies during the War of 1812. The first settlers in the area arrived in 1816. The village was established around 1817, and a post office was established in 1832. A marker contains many of the gravestones of early settlers in the Clearville Cemetery, and it still remains to this day. I'm certain that the remnants of some of the original stores, taverns, hotels, mills, factories, shops, churches, and school could be found with a little bit of exploration. A fishery was located near the dock until the 1950s when it was taken over by the township. Boats also transported grain and lumber exports from Clearville Dock to other areas around Lake Erie, and a smaller boat transported people from Clearville to Rondo. Two very important historical facts are as follows. The very first ever recorded municipal government meeting in Kent County was held at the Tavern in Clearville in 1827, and there's a cairn located in the area commemorating this meeting. Secondly, in 1900, a wagon and buggy woodworking shop was established. 3 years later, it was moved to Chatham and became the Gray's Carriage Works. Does that name sound familiar? Remnants of an old fishing boat, an ice crusher, and a winch are located on a marked historic site in the park. Currently, the 85-acre site, which was officially recognized as an improved park by the province in 1980, is a year-round playground with all amenities where many visitors and area residents alike enjoy swimming, fishing, camping, picnicking, boating, and tobogganing. The pavilion and the playground were built with the support of the local service clubs. The scenic ravine and creek is very popular with bird watchers and is also a refuge for wildlife. Its immediate neighbors include the Cataraqui Boy Scout Camp, originally known as Camp Clearville in the 1930s, and the protected 1,000-acre Clearville Creek Forest. Since the passing of Ontario Bills 108 and 23 and the changes to the Ontario Heritage Act, many culturally important historical and heritage buildings and sites in Ontario that served as educational tools for past, current, and future generations have been lost to developers. We hope that Clearville Park doesn't become another casualty to development should it be sold. Your Chatham-Kent Municipal Heritage Committee respectfully recommends that Clearville Park remain as a public space for everyone to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. This evening, we have the following reports that have been pulled from the agenda. Item 15A, Ward Boundary and Council Composition Review. We have a presentation by Strategy Corps, and it's been pulled by Councillor Harrigan, Councillor Sakachi, and Councillor Jubinville. Item 16A, the closure of Southwest Middlesex Limerick Landfill, has been pulled by Councillor Story and Councillor Sakachi. Item 16D, the motion of Councillor Wright regarding the divestment of Clearville Park, has been pulled by Councillor Wright and Councillor Thompson. Item 17A, 55 Croydon Street, Chatham, demolition, has been pulled by Councillor Jubinville. And 18A, the Bloomfield Business Park repurchase of 3 properties, has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi. Therefore, on consent agenda to be approved in one motion are the following reports. 14A, 15B, C, D, 16B, C, and that is it.
Councillor Jubinville and Councillor Finn, can I get you to move the consent agenda, please?
I so move. So seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Story? Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
Yepers.
And Councillor Story, are you there?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
We'll move on to item 15, corporate services.
Thank you. 15A, Ward Boundary and Council Composition Review. We have a presentation by Strategy Corps, and I welcome Sabine Matheson, who is on virtually this evening and will be doing the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council. I'm here with my colleague Olivia, well known to you all by now, and she and I will take you through the presentation. Just before I begin, I want to thank all of you and everyone who's participated in this process. The process has really been quite gratifying in many respects. But perhaps most in the way that people have risen to the challenge of providing input to our process that's really helped us to improve the final product. And I'm hoping that you'll see the benefits of your participation in what we're presenting to you tonight. Are we able to get our deck up on the screen? I'm not seeing it yet.
It is up.
Able to see it over there?
Yes, it is up.
Oh, okay. I'm still seeing the Chatham-Kent IT service desk, so I'm not sure if other online people are seeing it or not. I'll just begin by reminding folks that our task as consultants to Chatham-Kent is to really stay focused on the requirements of the effective representation test. And that means that, you know, while a huge amount of responsibility is vested in us to consider all of the various factors and put them together in ways that will work for Chatham, it's not in any way the case that we're able to just go willy-nilly on an exercise of creative line drawing. We have to work very carefully within certain constraints, which are best elaborated and understood as the effective representation test. And it really is important to understand that our recommendations tonight are informed by those 5 factors And just so everybody knows, I can't see the slides, so as long as you can, that's all good, and I'll just try and make sure that I stay.
Sabine, if I can just check with others on the Zoom call. Counselors, can you see the presentation? You can, Counselor Thompson?
Yes, indeed. Counselor Story, yep.
Okay.
Remote location I'm participating from, so I'll just try and check in from time to time with Olivia on it. And I'm just in the preamble right now, but I just want to remind you that effective representation means the sorts of factors we can take into account are the equality of representation by population today and also tomorrow. And by tomorrow, we're supposed to think in terms of now till 2030. So it's the first two factors are today and then future population growth. The second is we're supposed to have due regard to geographic and topographical features that make for appropriate boundaries. And so you'll see that we've tended to use things that would make sense to people, you know, like whether it's the river or whether it's the 401 or that kind of thing. And, you know, you can't always find the population massing in places that conveniently have those sorts of features, but wherever we do have those features, we've tried to pick the right one. And this is where a lot of very valuable input that we've had through the process has suggested to us how we could improve those boundaries. And then the factors number 4 and 5 relate to trying to understand the various aspects of community of interest or diversity of interest that make it appropriate to pair groups with one another. And sometimes that's reflected either by matters like we heard so clearly from the OFA or from others in relation to ensuring that we have appropriate community of interest. But sometimes that's also reflected by the way people move around and orient themselves. And so a lot of the commentary that we had about how to deal with matters relating to boundaries in the Charing Cross Road area or also up in the Dover area related to that. So those are the considerations that we are obligated to consider. Now, what it also means is that there's other considerations that we are not supposed to take into account. And I do want to emphasize that there's lots of other things that you might want to consider in terms of guesses about how you might think a council might or might not work. But our job is to look at this through the lens of the voter and to make sure that they have confidence in the voting system that gets this council elected. Some of the matters that people might have in their mind that relate to how that council might be expected to perform after are frankly matters that are left to the ballot box, and they can be left to the ballot box if we have a fair system that people acknowledge as being fair. We can't subordinate matters that relate to getting to a fair system in the first place in the hopes of trying to optimize how a council will function. It goes the other way around. We have a fair system, and then we expect that the public scrutiny of the people involved operating that council after it's elected will make sure that it operates as well as it can by, you know, rewarding those with re-election or not. But I think that that's a really important consideration because throughout we've been urged to consider many things, some of which would be very appropriate for us to consider because they relate to things in that effective representation test that I was just describing. Other things that would be less important for us to consider. And I do want to emphasize we listen to everything, but ultimately we have to decide based on the effective representation test, and that may provide some important context for how and why we made the recommendations we did. Olivia, we should be on slide 2, and I'll just remind members of council and members of the public that on December the 16th, you really acknowledged our receipt of our previous recommendations, but asked us to do some extra work to try and improve them. The purpose of tonight is to report on how we've given effect to that. So we were asked to consider the internal boundaries within Chatham and as it relates to what would become wards 5, 6, and 7 in the draft that we had that was labeled 15CV2. There's something demonic about the numbering system that reflects the sheer number of different options that we have, and I apologize for that. You'll see us, through the course of the report, we've transitioned to the more humane option 1, option 2, and option 3. But for anybody who is only tuning in now for the first time, there have been so many more than just options 1 and 2 and 3. Those, we've just aggregated them under those names for the purposes of clarity tonight. You also asked us to take a look, frankly, at the boundaries between wards 1 and 2 on that option 15 CV2 and 3 and 4. And so we did that. If we can jump to the next. So basically, we present these 3 options. These 3 options provide you with 2 options that would result in a council of 15. And as directed, we have basically 1 option that would direct you to a council of 18. To report back on the specific things that we were asked to report on, and this would be slide 4, Olivia. The second component of the motion, and I'm hoping you're on slide 4, I can't tell. In relation to the Chatham boundaries, our first comment would be that through the process, we heard no substantive criticism of the Ward 3 boundaries that we presented in our December report. We heard criticism of a preference of I'd rather have no boundaries at all, but nobody said I'd like it better if you moved it from here or from there. And so in our report, we have not altered them because we weren't given any grist for the mill that would lead us to an alteration. So in reporting back to you, we can conclude that both are permissible. Under the relevant section of the Municipal Act, you can have wards, or you can have an at-large, or you can have a hybrid of the 2. But while I would concede that it's permissible to continue with 1 single ward for Chatham-Kent, I don't feel that we're in a position that we can recommend it as being preferable. And that, there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but I think the most obvious is the one that we've summarized here, which is from the perspective of effective representation. I'll acknowledge that 6 councillors in 1 ward might have made sense at amalgamation because you were going from such a much larger number, which I think was over 100, and you were trying to deal with a lot of moving parts at that time. But if you were starting from scratch today, I can't really see a good reason to get up in the morning and design a system that would give some voters the opportunity to elect and then be represented by 6 councillors, while others would only have 1 councillor. And in each of the new options that we are presenting, that would mean that you would have a spread of either 6 councillors to 1 councillor in the 15s, or you'd have 7 to 2 in the 18s. And because there are doable wards, it doesn't really seem that I couldn't look somebody in the eye and say, oh, we had to do it that way, in any way that makes sense to the considerations of the effective representation test. I think, I'll acknowledge that some people said, well, I think it might lead to more cohesive decision-making within the boundaries of Chatham-Kent, which is a consideration that a person might have, but it's not a consideration that I can have, given the function that I'm here to perform, which is about ensuring that it's fair at the point of election. And so it's for that reason that we have recommended, we heard you, but we are recommending 3 wards for Chatham-Kent. And I assure you, we looked at that very long and hard. And so I'll acknowledge that it's permissible. I'll acknowledge that it's what you've had, but I don't think I could sign my name to it as preferable. And so I have not. Just jumping along to the second thing you asked us to consider. This was something we were able to act on. motion 3 asked us to consider ways to improve the boundary between what would be labeled Ward 1 and 2 in the previous option along the Charing Cross Road. And we were told that Charing Cross and Cedar Springs, we'd oriented them for the purposes of mathematics to Ward 1, but we were told that if we could, we should reorient them towards the adjacent ward so that they would be more connected to Blenheim if the math worked. And in fact, the math does work. So in both of the options we have presented, we're able to report back that we've reacted to that input in what we hope will be viewed a favorable way and an improvement. Now, we also were asked to take a look at what was going on the north side, and in particular, the boundaries between what were then Ward 3 and 4. And in particular, we heard that Dover Township, as we've designed it, was too much of it was oriented towards Wallaceburg, and we were told that that was kind of not delivering effective representation because it was putting too much of the township into a two-member ward focused around Wallaceburg. And so the first thing we tried to do was just cut it differently. So you'll see the red line there on the thing labeled rejected draft. There's a lot of rejected drafts with Olivia earned her pay the last 2 months. The first thing we did was we tried to reorient it. But what it did, as you can see, was it creates what we think is far too large a Ward 3. And this reflects just a relatively low population density in the area that's covered by that Ward 3 that would have resulted. And so it's too big, so we do not recommend it. And it doesn't survive as a recommendation. It merely survives as a footprints of our thinking. But you can see we said, well, okay, it's too big as one ward, but what if we split it into 2? Now, I assure you, we didn't just try splitting it once into 2. We kicked around where Dresden might best be oriented to, and also, frankly, the Kent Bridge area as well. And based on the consultations that we had, the option that was preferable was this one, having due regard to all the various factors that are relevant to effective representation. And so we resolved the problem of too big a Ward 3 by splitting it into 2, and then we combine it with the solution to the Ward 1 and Ward 2 problem that we described above in the previous slide, and that's what gets you to option 1. So we wipe away all the names of the previous 15, 2, C, 3, V, whatever, that makes it sound like either your driver's license or your OHIP number, and this is option 1. Now, we also came up with another version, which is presented here. And what we've done is we've shown you 15CV2, and the design of that, you'll see the red ward, Ward 1, uses as its northern boundary the Thames River. And we were trying to come up with alternative solutions to the too much of Dover associated with Wallaceburg problem that was raised at the last meeting. And so what we did was we tried all kinds of different ways of squeezing the toothpaste tube that I've described of, if you're going to change the boundary and try to avoid having a Ward 3 or a Ward 4 that's simply too big, what do you do? And so we said, well, what if instead of using the Thames River as the boundary, and if you look on the thing that's labeled option 2, you'll see that the little dotted line shows where the boundary was in the original version that you asked us to reconsider, and we pushed it down to the 401. So we're moving from one recognizable feature to another. We're trading the river for the highway. And you'll see that we actually put Tilbury into Ward 2. And we created a new Ward 2 that separated Tilbury from Whately. And we created that, Ward 2 that you see there. And we also maintained the split between on the Ward 4 and 5 side so that Ward 3 wasn't too catastrophically large. But you see what this does is it forces the toothpaste to sort of squeeze more of the population down. So Ward 4 changes and Ward 3 changes as well. This actually is not a bad option either. And what we'll do is we'll kind of give you some of the pros and cons of both. And perhaps the easiest way to do that is to show them side by side, which is what you get on slide 8. And Olivia, if you just want to jump there or let me know when you have. Okay, I think you have. So if I were just going to describe it, both 1 and 2 deliver improvements over the status quo. So honestly, from our perspective, we can live with either one. We think that they would meet the test. We think they would meet the test admirably. We prefer one, and we felt it was our obligation to give you a hard and fast recommendation. But I would say that would be like a choice between my 2 favorites, as opposed to one that I thought was good and one that I thought was not good. So if you run down the list of things that they have in common, they're both a big improvement over what you've got from the perspective of the effective representation test. I want to emphasize, it's not my opinion that they're better than what you've got. It's the application of the test to what you've got. 1 and 2 are both better. They deal with the problems of stray representation, where you've had actual urban boundary growth that's outpaced your old boundaries, and it deals also, most importantly, with the chronic underrepresentation that Chatham has. And I do want to emphasize, doing nothing really isn't a very good option. If you were to do nothing, I think you'd be very vulnerable to somebody criticizing the outcome of the review, because it would perpetuate the underrepresentation of Chatham. And so both 1 and 2 solve that problem. It's interesting that option 1 starts off better on the mathematics and trends away from optimal, whereas option 2 starts worse and then gets better. But there's not much to choose between them in terms of how much they vary from parity. I don't think it's particularly relevant. They're both good enough. Both of them achieve strong outcomes on the effective representation test. About the other matters about geography and community of interest, they both result in wards that are manageably sized and actually that are smaller than existing wards. And they both improve the problem of disparity in representation. In other words, not having 6 or 3 or 2, but you get it down to every ward has either 1 or 2, which I think is an advantage. There are a couple of differences. Option 1 maintains 2 councillors per ward in 3 of the county wards. But not surprisingly, if you make the wards bigger, they become more of a mixed basket. You know, they're harder to service because they're geographically bigger, and you include communities that have less affinity. So for example, you're sticking Pancourt in with Dresden, but we were told by some that maintaining 2 councillors per ward was a feature. So you got your 2 councillors per ward in 3 of the county wards. Option 2, by contrast, creates 4 smaller single councillor wards. And these are more manageable from a geographical area perspective, but you've only got 1 person to manage the smaller territory. The other thing is, not surprisingly, given the squeeze the toothpaste in the toothpaste tube phenomenon that I've described, you could say that option 1 tends to focus on solving problems on one side, and option 2 tends to focus on solving for the challenge of solving problems on the other side. Option 1 maintains the representation for Wheatley and Tilbury the way it is, but it's expected to provide better representation in East Kent by better reflecting the actual orientation of the community. In other words, by doing that better than option 2. Option 2 may provide better representation for Wheatley and Tilbury, especially as they grow, but it doesn't really improve the representation in East Kent. So on balance, we reached a conclusion that one is better than two. But as I emphasized, I think both of them are acceptable, and that's why they're here. So you could pick either one of them. If you were to skip 9, because I basically just covered that content, Olivia, and jump to 10, so what you see is the two options, option 1 and option 2, which we've just presented as improvements that reflect the direction of council since the last meeting. And then we also have the Council of 18 option, which we've shown here with the 3-ward model, same as presented last time. So that is unchanged since the last time we presented to you. And just the last thought I'd leave you, just intellectually then, what are the choices that you have to make? And I don't know that I was inspired by the NFL playoffs, but this does look a little bit like how you get to the Super Bowl. Representing, one conference is all the options relating to Council 15. And the semifinal championships are the first thing you got to do is you got to decide about the Chatham composition. And in bold, we've said, honestly, we think it ought to be the 3-ward model, but at large is one that has been discussed. And then the second thing is you choose between the county composition, option 1 or option 2. And when you combine what you get from number 1 and from number 2, that would become the preferred 15 councillor model. Now, if you go over to the other side, we don't have a second option for how to compose the county. We haven't had any feedback on that since we initially presented 18. But the Chatham composition, we're recommending again the 3-ward model as presented in our December report. And then that would feed into a preferred 18 model. And our recommendation is that you take advantage of the opportunity to go to 15. I should tell you that by accident, I wound up having a conversation with the head of council in Kawartha Lakes, who was on council for several terms and who went through a planned reduction in their council size from 16 down to 8. And you'll recall that Kawartha Lakes is relevant because they are an amalgamated municipality from around the same era as Chatham-Kent that's similar in geography. So big challenge of a big place with big wards. And I just asked him, do you regret the reduction in council size? And they said, oh goodness, no. The advantages in clarity of representation and effectiveness of decision-making around the council table outweigh any of the burden issues. And his other observation was, while representation issues matter, if we're getting too much into local community ward issues, that's something that can be deferred to staff through improving the 311 process and other customer service aspects. Our job is to be the decision makers of the community, and the advantages of how we streamline our processes through that far outweighs it. So I say that not because I'm suggesting, hey, how about we go from 18 down to 9? It's a considerably more modest reduction that is being proposed here. But the one living, breathing example I had of a council that had reduced itself to that degree, to a much higher degree, his observation was, we'd never go back. So I hope that that provides some comfort to those who might be concerned about going from 18 down to 15. With that, Mr. Mayor, I apologize. I maybe went on a little longer than I thought, but given the immense amount of effort that people have devoted to the process, I thought it was appropriate to sort of put the full range of considerations on the table to best assist your decision-making as you move ahead. And thank you. Olivia, did I forget anything that I should have mentioned?
Nope, not on my end.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabine and Olivia. What I'm going to do is open it up for questions. So I want to break this up kind of like a planning session, because this could be a very long process, but I want to make sure the first thing is, if we go to this, the first segment here is asking questions of Sabine and Olivia. So any questions you have, and the plan is that once we get past that, we'll get on to the next area of discussions. So Councillor Anderson and Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And then if
through you.
anybody else put up your hand, I'll get you on the list.
I just have a really quick question for Sabine. I just want to make sure, in your first option that you had in your presentation there, it said Ward 1 councillor, but in our booklet that we have here, it does say 2. I just want to clarify that first option, Ward 1 is 2 councillors.
Olivia, do you just want to, I couldn't
Correct.
see.
Apologies, it is. It in option 1, Ward 1 has 2 councillors. I'll correct it on the screen now.
Thank you, thank you.
Councillor McGrail? Oh,
Thank you, through the mayor. I do have a question, but I also have a motion. So when do you want me to do my motion?
well, I've got some other people already that sent in for the motion itself.
Okay, so we'll do that afterwards. Okay, so my question is to Sabine. How bad do the numbers change when we put Mitchell's Bay within that Ward 4? So we went from marsh line to electric line. Like, what difference did that, like, drastically change? Because I know we had that conversation, and we had a really big conversation of that, and and I'm looking at this, and I see Mitchell's Bay is still with Wallaceburg, so I didn't know the effects of that, and why that maybe didn't come down.
Into the details of that, but the answer, the summary is, we really try to find a way to try and manage that, and Olivia can describe the specifics.
Yeah, so here I'm going to switch my screen to show the deck that many of you will be familiar with, that we worked through with many of you, and show you this one. So we did look at options, actually at the, based on our discussion, we looked at options that pulled Mitchell's Bay out of that Wallaceburg ward on its own for F1. So this option, and I apologize for having to revert to the terrible names, but for the purpose of the discussion, the second from the left large map there is option 1, with the only change that Mitchell's Bay is now included in like the Dover Dresden ward. And that did quite dramatically make the math not look good. So it really does basically result in a Wallaceburg ward that is well outside the optimal range in terms of population. Actually, I think it went into the outside of the acceptable range, so beyond 25%. Ward 4, and then it also puts Ward 4 outside the optimal range, well outside of optimal, I think still unacceptable, but it just really, really tweaked the math. And we did do the same, we tried the same test with option 2 on the far right, to the same effect. It just really messes up the math for both the Wallaceburg ward and for the kind of Dover Township ward in both cases, for both options 1 and 2.
Olivia, did you change your screen? It didn't change for us.
Apologies. Here, I'll pull it up. I'll put it up here again. Right. Do this. So we did, so this is, are you able to see are there 4 graphs on the screen now?
No.
For what it's worth, by the way, I'm still seeing IT service desk.
Sabine, I think at the top of your screen, right now you can't see it, but you can see CK Council Desktop, and then you can see Olivia's screen. If you click on Olivia's screen, that might have, there, Olivia, we can see yours now.
Look at both versions of option 1 and 2 as presented in this report, where we make the change of putting in the red circles, you can see in both cases we've taken Mitchell's Bay and added it to the ward that is associated with Dover Township in both cases. And in both cases, it does skew the math kind of unacceptably for both the Wallaceburg ward and the Dover Township ward. And so we did think that that was not necessarily something that we could recommend based on the collection of the balance of feedback that we received. But we did look at it and we did try to test out all these permutations that we heard about from folks, and there were others as well.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions of Sabine or Olivia online? Seeing none, then, Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question. Did this come into consideration at all? Like right now, I would say if we take out Wallaceburg, rural, just voting from rural to go into Chatham, it's, and including the mayor and the Chatham vote, it's 9-7 rural to Chatham votes. Going forward, now it's going to be 7-6 for Chatham over rural. I know we're supposed to vote on everything together, but did that ever come into consideration, just the amount of rural representation to urban representation compared to what we have now?
It's a great question. I would say it absolutely came into consideration, but not quite in the way that you describe it. Firstly, we're not supposed to consider the mayor because the mayor could come from anywhere. So that wouldn't be a factor. The second is we're supposed to start from mathematical parity. And so part of the reason that's driving the change is right now the status quo underrepresents Chatham. And so that was taken into consideration, but not because of a kind of aggregated definition of rural versus urban, but rather because of the structural underrepresentation of individual residents by structure. But what we did do was try to make sure as much as possible that we didn't take steps that would deliberately undermine the effective representation of places with lower population density by making it so that, it's represented, but it's tied to an urban area, so effectively gets watered down as being like the backyard of an urban ward. So we worked very hard to try and aggregate areas of sufficient population in rural that they could have appropriate representation based on their population. So we don't, it's not, and this is one of the reasons why I started off with, it's viewed from the perspective of the individual, not from the perspective of aggregations of individuals. So it's, but in coming up with effective representation for community of interest, that's where the consideration of rural and urban comes into play. And you'll recall, Councillor, one of the things we did when people were saying, how about we try it as a wheel or a series of pie-shaped wards? And the reason, it sounds like a good idea because it mixes together rural and urban in every ward, but it really seriously runs the risk that the rural portion of every one of those is always, 20% or 30%, meaning that the urban areas would just elect everybody. So we definitely consider the effectiveness of representation to the degree that we certainly wouldn't want to structurally make it so that people were underrepresented. But fundamentally, the biggest problem that you have with the status quo is that Chatham is a percentage of the population which is greater than what is currently represented by its wards. And then with Wallaceburg, we were given very clear direction to try and put two together. Or sorry, you have to have a two, to not separate the Wallaceburg is just big enough that it has to have about a representative and a half. So then If we don't split it into two, then part of what we have to do is mix in some rural areas with that. So it's a very astute question that you asked, but I hope what you see is under the Supreme Court of Canada's direction, we're supposed to look at it from the perspective of the individual voter.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thanks for putting Cedar Springs and Charing Cross in to Ward 2 there from that recommendation last time. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth, through you, Sabina and Olivia. Sorry, this is just a very technical question as we're all trying to put glasses on and zoom in onto where some of the wards end. Can you please identify the corner of Ward 4 and Ward 3 and what community that has in option 1? You can see that there's the label of a town there.
Call up a better map on that.
Can you say, I'm going to pull up, I will also say at the bottom of the executive summary in the report, if people do have it open, your GIS team has imposed all these maps in your GIS. So there's interactive versions of all of those online, which is what I will go to now. And then I will ask you to just tell me again the specifics.
So if I'm looking at the boundary of Ward 4, and how everyone's going to know that I'm directionally not very functional, but the boundary of Ward 3 and Ward 4, on the east side, that corner right there, yeah, what is that community that your cursor is hovering over?
That is the intersection of Kent Bridge and the Thames or Longwood Road.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was my only question.
Okay, seeing no other questions, then I will go to Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. So first, I would just, actually, do you know what? I'm going to first read the motion that I have and had sent to Judy and Meredith. And this is based on the recommended wording in the report, that Council direct administration to bring a bylaw of option 1 of the Strategy Core report to the March 3rd, 2025 council meeting for voting. And if I have a seconder, I have just a few things to say.
Councillor Jubenville.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. So first, I'd like to begin by thanking Sabina and Olivia from Strategy Core for being very patient with us and also going through and ensuring that the work that they're doing is very intentional and aligning with what is a very complicated kind of legislation and formulas for how we do ward boundaries. I would say generally speaking, we've heard through this process that there is support from constituents of reducing our council size. We also heard that in some of the deputations that we received and from some of our larger stakeholder groups, particularly the KFA deputation. Thank you for that. And so that being said, though, we still have a number of options, and I know that there's lots of options on the table. So I thought I would just start the conversation by putting forward the recommended council composition and ward boundary line as Strategy Core has recommended. I anticipate people may ask for amendments. I'm not going to say things are friendly. I think every amendment we should vote on and discuss as a councillor, just because it's very important, this conversation. And I will just note that we had some conversations in December. We had given a lot of feedback, and I think in many ways, the presentation that we heard tonight has addressed just about all, if not, 95% of the concerns. Sometimes they're mathematically not able to be done, or sometimes legislation tells us we can't do them in that sort of way, and so I really do appreciate that. I know that change is hard and requires bravery and consideration, but it's also in this case very necessary for us to think about changing our ward boundaries, and now could be the time to do that. So really looking forward to the conversation. I will say that I have shared already with the clerk and their team that if this fails, I'm putting up option 2, right? So, and then if that fails, then somebody can put up option 3, right? Like I think we should, vote for your favorite because there's lots of options, but this is maybe just the smoothest process that we can have with the 3 options in front of us.
Okay, so Councillor Jubenville, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
I don't really have anything extra other than echo everything that Councillor Harrigan said. I think Sabine and Olivia and the team did a really good job, and I know it was probably a very arduous task what they went through, and I'm very happy with the result of it, so thank you.
Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I'll defer my comments to the end. I don't really have any at this exact second. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any amendments that I had the opportunity to speak on if there was. Thank you.
Councillor Crew, followed by Councillor Anderson.
But it's on. It's on. I can sing. There we go. That'll get it working. All right. Did you hear that? So do I need to do it again? Okay. I would like to make an amendment that Chatham be represented at large.
Councillor Harrigan, are you okay with that adjustment?
So I'm absolutely okay to have the conversation, but I noted I think it's better if the amendments are not friendly and we vote on the amendment so that we actively have the conversation about Chatham as a ward being at large or 3, and then we can decide as a council.
So can I suggest then that, sorry, go ahead.
We just vote on them separately.
So my knowledgeable colleague, neighbor here suggested that we just make it a number 2 and we would vote on 1 and 2 separately, just as the same thing.
Okay.
Just to clarify, though, it won't be 1 and 2, it'll be an amendment, and if the amendment fails, we go back to the original motion of the 3 wards.
Perfect, thank you.
Isn't she great?
Okay, so we'll be voting on a 1 and 2, and we'll talk about whether Chatham's at large or by ward, and then we'll go into your motion of, okay. Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I want to just have a quick comment that I definitely appreciate the work that's been done on this, and going through the 2 options, I'll just state why I like each one, option 1 and 2. What I really like about option 1 is that 4 of the 5 rural wards would bank up to a Chatham proper ward, and I think that is a really great option. To be able to have like the best representation of keeping the rural and the city very much cohesive in their decision-making processes. What I like about the second option is that, West and South Kent are predicted to have some of the most growth. So splitting them up right now and making them a little bit different, especially with option 2 with Ward 1 and Ward 2, is appealing as a councillor to think that there would be one that would be representing Wheatley and Merlin, and then one that would be representing Tilbury. Just because we know through issues that we have that it's sometimes difficult to divide and conquer them, and if you have just one, it makes sense. But I definitely would support option 1, should that be the will of council.
Thank you. Let's see, Councillor McGrail? Oh, sorry, anybody else that, Councillor McGrail, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Kenneth. I do want to echo, the great work that has been done here and the time involved and the nerve-wracking and racking of the brain to make this fit. I understand this completely. We had some really good discussion on my phone calls, but, and at this point in time, I represent Ward 4 right now, and I got to make sure our voice is heard. And I would like to make an amendment that Mitchell's Bay be part of Ward, in option 1, Ward 4, I believe. So it would, so then instead of marsh line, it would come to electric line, and that would be the ward boundary. So that's my, if I can make that amendment and see what happens there.
We can put that as a 3, but the issue we run into, then it takes it mathematically off
Yeah,
scale that, for what Sabine and Olivia were telling us.
I understand that, but I also understand sometimes it's about our communities.
Okay, so why don't we?
Right? And that's what I'm doing right now, is representing my community.
Okay, perfect. So we'll put that on as another one, so a part 3 that we're going to vote on, and it would go through those first 2, and then we'll be voting on the main one that Councillor Harrigan's put up.
Just one clarification, just for Meredith's wording. So that Ward 4 be amended to move from which road to which electric road?
That Ward 4 would be amended to include up to electric line instead of marsh line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do I have any other questions? And then we can, Councillor Scotchy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is just in regards to the motion that's on the floor right now in regards to the amended to have Chatham at large. So if this is supported and Chatham is now at large, it's going to be at large regardless if we go through option 1, 2, or 3, or just this one? Just this one? Because if Chatham is supported at large, now we're literally going to have 6 votes in one area. And I think listening to what Sabine had mentioned through the entirety of her presentation is that that was something that was strongly recommended against. So I guess just want to keep that to consideration, that if we're going to do something, having almost half the votes in one ward, I think is could cause some significant challenges. Thank you.
Okay, we have some more questions online. Councillor Story, then Councillor McDonald, and Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to reiterate my thanks to Sabine and Olivia and administration for all of the work that you have done with us and with the community. Really enjoyed my conversations. I learned a lot. And I think based on what I've heard so far, everyone around the council table has also taken a great deal of time to listen to our constituents and read through these documents with a fine-tooth comb. So I totally respect all the perspectives shared. I do think, based on what I've heard so far, everyone really does support what Sabine and Olivia have done. So I do have a bit of a concern with the 2 amendments in the sense that the Ward 4 does skew that number quite substantially, and Sabine did say that would not be a recommended option, and same with the Ward 6. And obviously I'm a Ward 6 councillor, and I'm just reading through the report, and it does say it might have made sense in amalgamation to have an at-large, but it seemed unfair to design a system in which some voters had the opportunity to elect and be represented by 6 by others when others would not. So I completely appreciate the need for all of us to represent our, strongly our ward needs, but I also think the bigger picture, Strategy Corps has recommended these for a reason, so therefore I will be supporting option 1 as written. And I think the recommendations are there for a reason, to really ensure voter parity. And I thank everyone for the discussion. I'm really learning a lot. I have throughout this whole process, and I respect the fact that we've had such a robust discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McDonald, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So I just had some thoughts on option 1. So while I do like Ward 2, where Ridgetown and Blenheim are together and Erio and Rondeau are together, it's not favorable for me because it comes at the expense of a councillor in Ward 3 for Bothwell and Thamesville. So I don't think I would want to support something that where I like part of it, but not another part. So just wanted to share those thoughts, but and also thank Sabine and her team. I know it's been a lot of work, and I've enjoyed our conversations. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you. I certainly agree with everyone that Sabine and her group have done some great work, and a lot of us, spent some time contributing to those interviews, and I think that was a process that allowed us to learn a lot about our communities and how boundaries impact that, and the importance of parity. And I think that when we started this process, that's something that I thought about a lot 8 years ago when we tried to do it, to equalize some of this voter parity. And it's interesting that we've gone through this process and are now here. And I've heard a lot of feedback from the community. I think one of our struggles, and you can't unscramble the egg as much as people would like, but in '98, maybe we didn't end up with the system that we all thought we would. We're a single tier municipality, and we look at some of our neighbors that have the upper tier and lower tier, and we see their representation models, and sometimes I think that makes us judge our own representation model as well. So when we look at a place like Essex County, they have their urban centers like Amherstburg and Leamington and Kingsville, and they all elect their councillors at large, and then they have their county councillors as well. And you have Sarnia with this kind of odd system that they have 4 city councillors and elected at large, and then 4 city county councillors elected at large. You have Oxford County that has Woodstock with 6 councillors at large and a mayor that's part of that county. Ingersoll has a similar setup. Thunder Bay, who's single tier, has 5 councillors at large and then 8 ward councillors, so even more confusing than our system. So I think uniqueness is a feature of municipal governments in Ontario. There's quite a few different models, and I think when you move throughout the province, it's kind of surprising to see those models and the attributes that maybe make them helpful in building communities, and some of the attributes that maybe make them divide communities at times. So I think that putting that in context is part of what makes me think about this process. And I certainly appreciate, particularly for the councillors outside of Chatham, that I'm not an expert on those areas. Maybe I grew up in North Kent, and I think I understand that area pretty well, but I don't know much about the boundaries between South Kent and West Kent, and exactly how those communities identify with each other. So I'll support option 1 because it's been brought forward. I'd also support option 2, and I think that I've had some good conversations with councillors outside of Chatham to understand what some of those concerns are, and I think it's a really challenging process to make something that looks perfect. And I think going through this has been educating, it's been important, and I hope it serves the community well. And I just wanted to share how I view this process, and one of the reasons I think the at-large model makes sense for a community like Chatham. I wouldn't support splitting up Wallaceburg. I wouldn't support splitting up Tilbury, and I think there's some benefit to keeping communities of interest together. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Juvenville, I'll go to you, and then I'll go to Councillor Harrigan for final thoughts before we do the vote on this one.
Thank you. I do have one question. I don't know, it's about Councillor McGrail's. Should I ask now about her addition?
Certainly, go ahead.
And I apologize if this was already brought forward. Do we know how many people that would involve if we added from marsh line to electric line, if we added that back into Ward 4? How many people is that involving, adding back in?
Precise for electric line. So in the I won't pull up the image again because it might take a while, but when I looked the version that we looked at that included Mitchell's Bay actually looked at basically following Baldoon Road, I believe. It's either Baldoon Road or Bear Line straight up to the water, and kind of including that triangle area around Mitchell's Bay. And when we look at that, we are looking at approximately we're looking at about 840 people.
Okay, so just to be clear, were you looking at the winter line in Baldoon?
So here, I'll share my screen.
Yeah. I think you mentioned Bear Line, but I think you maybe meant winter line.
Fine.
Oh,
So basically,
was it?
right now,
Okay.
so right now the option, I'll zoom in here as much as I can. And again, these are estimates. Like in theory, you can
That's
go
okay.
look at other ones. This is just the math. This is just so you know that what my
that's okay.
840 refers to. So you can see this box that it's very small, but it's labeled 412 in the red circle. This area. So right now the line is as the counselor pointed out, it's like marsh line area.
Just point of order. Sorry, Olivia, we can't see your screen, but I see that we're trying maybe to view it, or maybe we're not. I don't know. Can the clerk comment on that? Just because I know you're referencing an image and we can't see it.
So I can see it on mine. Meredith, do you have it on yours? There we go.
Hey, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please. Thank you very much for pointing it out. So you can see here the line currently cuts along here. You know, we'll just, if we imagine that the whole municipality is tilted, it cuts east-west. It's a triangle, and so the block we looked at would assume that now the boundary between the Wallaceburg ward and Ward 4 is in fact bare line, which it follows all the way up to basically I can actually check to see what that tiny little road there is. Or there's no, it is bare line. It follows bare line straight to the Sydenham River. Bit more helpful, you can see the chunk of that we've considered Mitchell's Bay for the purposes of population blocking.
Okay, so you're thinking around 800 people that would be added back in? Is that what your guesstimate is? Okay,
Yeah,
thank
to
you.
the ward, to the Dover, Dresden ward.
Okay, thank you very much.
The update that I brought the estimates up, so I would have them. The actual estimates for, I'll zoom out now so you can see. The actual estimates for option 1, if Mitchell's Bay is to be removed based on these boundaries, are that Ward 3, or the Northeast Kent, it goes to Ward 3 is at -13, -14, -15. The Wallaceburg ward is -14, -15, -15. And that like West Kent, the blue ward, Ward 4, is -13, -12, -12.
Okay, thank you.
The most positive ward is +10 that would likely be in both Chatham and in southeast Kent. So that Blenheim ward. 9 +8. So the spread stays around 25.
Councillor Duville, anything else?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Harrigan.
I have no final words to say except for to acknowledge how complicated this process is, and I appreciate the discussion that we had.
We will start with this one. And these are 2 amendments to the original motion that Councillor Harrigan has put up.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Story?
No.
And Councillor Thompson?
Sure, why not?
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-4. And now we'll vote on amending that Chatham be at large. Councillor Thompson?
Hard no.
Councillor Story?
No.
Councillor McDonald?
No.
All votes are in and motion fails 9-9. And number 1, we're voting on option 15. Option 1, which is 15 members of council, option 1. Councillor Story,
Yes.
Councillor McDonald,
No.
Councillor Thompson.
No.
All votes are in and motion passes 13-4. Oh, sorry, we're missing a vote. How do you vote? Yes. Thank you. So it's 14-4.
Well, congratulations, everyone. We got through this, and yes, it made a major change. It's been in the brewing for a lot of years now, and I'm surprised we got through this in an hour, but I think it's all the discussion we've had leading up to this. So congratulations, everyone. Yes. Sorry, Madam Clerk, can you just summarize, just so everyone walks out of here with the clarity of what we just passed?
Yes, we have just passed for the next election that we will have 15 members of council, and we will be a small amendment to the Ward 4 in that example of option 1 on the Ward 4, the Mitchells Bay area.
Okay, we'll move on to item 16. Infrastructure and Engineering Services.
16A, closure to Southwest Middlesex Limerick Landfill.
Councillor Story and Councillor Sakachi, could I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
Seconded.
Okay, Councillor Story.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this detailed report. Certainly there's a lot of discussion around landfills in Chatham-Kent lately. So I just had a couple of questions, probably for Edward. Could you give us a quick clarification on the percentage, how we calculated the number, the percentage that we're paying today? To my very untrained eye, it seemed quite high. Could you give us a quick summary of how that number was calculated, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The percentage is based upon each municipality's use of the landfill over time. The landfill's been around for 51 years, and different municipalities came in and out based on their usage. So, there was a percentage assigned over the years. So it is a mathematical formula based on your use. It's a weighted average based on the number of years that you've been in there. And our number originally started at 50%. And we were part of providing 50% of the costs for about 25 years, but then the Bothwell was removed starting in 1997. So you start to work all those percentages out, we come out to being at the percentage that's been identified in the report.
I appreciate you crunching those numbers for us. Do you have a sense at this point, and I appreciate this happened quite a while ago, given how much we were paying, do you know why CK was not involved in that RFP process? I know we do have a lot of pretty valuable expertise on our team that could have provided some input into that. Do you have any sense, based on your historical knowledge of the issue, why that came to be that way?
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. The simple answer is that we're not the administrator. It's not our ECA. It's actually a landfill that's owned by Southwest Middlesex. It's their responsibility to fulfill the requirements of the Ministry of Environment order. So they led the RFP for the engineering works that's to be done, and they'll be leading the monitoring phase of this as well.
Great. And then last, a couple of questions. How were the tipping fees collected and distributed?
Again, this is a landfill that's owned by Southwest Middlesex, so it would be they were collecting the tipping fees. There was some revenue that was collected as part of that, and that money was set aside in a reserve, And the purpose of that reserve that they collect those revenues really was to offset the closure costs. So over time, that money was held in reserve, and that has been applied to the cost of the closure in terms of the construction cost.
And then how did we determine the future monitoring costs? I assume those are probably still estimates, but how did you come to, or how did the team come to that future monitoring cost amount?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the future monitoring costs are just that, an estimate at this time. We anticipate the monitoring is going to have to continue for anywhere from 25 to 35 years. So at this point, we really don't know the longevity. It all depends on the results of the monitoring. We do have a number of closed landfills within Chatham-Kent, and looking at the cost that we're incurring in those, as well as based on conversations with the municipality of Southwest Middlesex, that's how we came up with the estimate for now.
And then my last question, just because we seem to have had, and obviously when you have an amalgamated community and different agreements with different pre-amalgamated communities, these things can sometimes pop up and perhaps cost us more down the line. But do you have any sense of any other potential landfill situations in Chatham-Kent currently that would be of a similar nature to this that we just haven't been made aware of yet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not that I'm aware of within Chatham-Kent or any responsibilities outside of it.
Okay, thank you very much. That was all my questions. I appreciate that information.
Councillor Scacci?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Soldo. Edward, I noticed in this that it seems like it kind of came up in around the 2018 area. Is there a reason why, as a municipality, we wouldn't have been kind of pre-preparing for this from, I know this was well prior to your time, but from a cost perspective in regards to like creating a reserve at that time and just putting a little bit of money aside every year? Because it would have been obviously substantially easier to kind of put things on a year-to-year basis. I know this isn't affecting the taxation because it's coming from a reserve, but if we had been putting money into a reserve prior to 2018 in that time frame?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the inspection report, which started the closure of the Limerick landfill was actually in 2018. Around 2020, there was some communications back and forth with between Southwest Middlesex and Chatham-Kent. And at that time, they were working through a number of the engineering studies to determine what is the cost of the closure. We only recently became aware of the actual closure costs late last year after the project was tendered. In terms of setting up a reserve previous to this, I can't really speak to that as I wasn't here, and I don't believe at that time we really knew the full cost potentially of this cost.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Stephen Brown. Obviously, I guess quite some time ago, maybe within a month or two, there has been kind of this momentum that started in our community in regards to de-amalgamation and those types of conversations. And one of the first communities that brought something similar, a small group, was Bothwell. And just curious to see how the benefits of amalgamation is going to affect this in regards to the payment aspects. If this was essentially area rated to a specific community, what would be the difference in cost roughly than right now, and how is that cost being spread out?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we were to area rate this cost to the former community of Zone and Bothwell, including both the one-time capital along with the ongoing monitoring, it'd be about $1,200 per property. If every resident or every property in Chatham-Kent were to pay, it would be about $28.
So a significant cost savings to that particular area by having this basically go through the entire community.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Story?
Yes.
Counselor Thompson?
Yes.
And Counselor Jubenville absent. So all votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. Excuse me. 16D, motion of Counselor Wright regarding divestment of Clearville Park.
Counselor Wright, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Whereas the divestment of Clearville Park was proposed during the 2025 budget deliberations, as whereas the proposed divestment has not been communicated to the users of Clearville Park and surrounding areas, whereas other cost sharing or revenue opportunities may be dissolved once public consultation is launched. Divestment of, be it resolved that divestment of Clearville Park is deferred until a full consultation has been undertaken with the users of Clearville Park and surrounding areas. Full cost recovery options are reviewed and presented to the users of the season lots and how continued municipal ownership and operation would look like moving forward from a financial perspective. A report coming to council in spring, this is where I got to change it to fall, Judy, 2025, with options of full cost recovery options and divestment options along with any feasible partnership opportunities, and whereas a review needed to be done to the public parklands woodlot before divested.
Counselor Thompson, can I get you to second that?
I will second that, and I also have probably what we would call a part 4 to it. And I would add that the municipal staff meet with LTVCA staff and a report come to council in fall of 2025 regarding potential Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority ownership and operation of Clearview Park.
Is that a friendly amendment, Counselor Wright?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, the floor is yours to talk about it and go from there.
Yes, thank you again, Mayor. I really got to thank the public for the deputations. They really hit it really good on how important this park is to the community, how important it is to the people that use it. Again, I'm going to go back to 4 years ago when we started talks with Lower Thames, and we had community meetings. The mayor was there. And then COVID hit and we lost our contact at that point. Again, I would like to see Lower Thames look into it again. They have a board meeting in April. They were going to look at it then and come back to us. So at this time, I'd like to see what Lower Thames says before we move forward with anything. It is an important, valuable piece of property to the community, and it was spoke of well how they done it. I'd like to see what happens at their budget board meeting. Thank you.
Counselor Thompson, followed by Counselor Harrigan. Counselor Harrigan, followed by Counselor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I do have some questions about the wording of the motion, but maybe I'll direct them to CAO and staff to help understand what we will see in the report. The first one is around the references. I think in item 3 is where it first comes forward with the full cost recovery options and divestment options. Can you help me understand what you would interpret that to be, particularly in terms of understanding capital costs and capital expenses?
Thank you. Maybe Mr. Solda wants to add something too, but thank you, Mr. Mayor. So certainly whenever we see full cost recovery options, we'd be looking at capital costs as well as operating costs. So I think the approach we would take there is, and I think this was indicated during budget, that there are significant infrastructure costs going forward at that property. And so that would have to be included in it. But we can break it out between operating and capital, so that'll be clear from council's perspective. But that's the approach that we would take. Assuming the mover is in agreement with that, that's the approach we would take when we see words full cost recovery. Okay.
And I'm just wondering then if I could just modify it, a friendly amendment to say to remove full, to have options for cost recovery, and then bracket full end part. I'd like to see how this plays out. Like I think about So just for members of the public, when we looked at this during our budget, the capital expenditures required over the next 10 years totaled $4.2 million. So there's 100 folks camping at Clearville Park, right, dividing $4.2 million. That's a lot of money to put on the backs of people who are seasonal there. But maybe there's like a blended model or some sort of balance that we could look at, because I think members of the general public also do enjoy the park, right? So there is some tax burden that all of members would shoulder. So I'm just wondering if that's a friendly amendment to the mover.
Councillor Wright, friendly? Yes. Councillor Thompson?
Oh, wait, sorry, I had.
Sorry, just asking, this is a friend, another portion.
Yeah. Done.
I see Councillor Thompson shaking his head.
I'm fine with
Okay, Councillor Harrigan, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to reiterate, and I think it's really important to note this, that when these sort of decisions come up at budget, council is in a very unique headspace, right? We're presented with a big number. We're hearing from our constituents about the lack of affordability for their taxes to go up. And so when we see options for, divestment or big cost savings or things that end in millions, it is something where we're like, okay, haven't heard anybody really scream no, so maybe that's an easy yes. And then in this case, I think Councillor Wright asking for a bit of a pause and maybe some further consideration, and especially hearing the deputations, is a very sage decision to make. Because then when we get to council meetings, we often think more about what the community impact could be. So perhaps this one is not just an all or nothing, kind of we keep it entirely or we scrap it entirely. Perhaps there can be a way forward. I will also share that being alongside Councillor Anderson, somebody who represents an area in West Kent that has kind of privatized access to the water, where the community is saying we wish we had more access to water, our shoreline, to be able to naturalize some of our shoreline to enjoy as a community. I do think that it's worth thinking through a little bit longer than just the budget conversations, this decision. And then I'm grateful for the friendly amendment there, because like I had said in my discussion, I don't want to see a report that just says, well, 4.2 divided by 110 seasonal campers is this much per person, right? Because I think we can look at different options of what that could be. So really appreciate this and happy to support the motion.
Mr. Dubin?
Yeah, I thought I might take this opportunity to just say something to the public. I know that some folks that presented today were suggesting, well, no one has consulted with us yet. And I understand that, but I wanted the public to understand that when we bring these things forward, we don't speak to the public just yet. We ask for direction from council. So once council gave direction in and around November when the budget was approved, it was always our intention to consult, not in the winter months, because it's very hard to get a hold of people during the winter months. So it's sort of a cart before the horse thing. We certainly can't go and consult with you and get people riled up without even getting direction from council, because council won't be very happy with us either. So I do appreciate that for members of the public who are sort of, well, we never heard anything about this, no one talked to us. It's the way the process works, but I want everyone to know that it was always our intention to consult, and in fact, even if staff didn't, council would have made us consult. So I do apologize that that's the way it sometimes plays out, that it seems like things are happening without an opportunity to hear from folks. It's always our intention to be as transparent as possible, but we have to follow a process, and staff cannot go out and start talking to people about divesting without direction from council. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to explain that. Thank you.
Councillor McGrail?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Caniff. I am going to support this because I do believe that this next step is, consultation with everybody. Because I come from Ward 4, and I have Mitchell's Bay, right? And we have a marine park in Mitchell's Bay, and I would very much hope that before anything came like this, I would have been consulted as a counselor. So going forward, I like this. I like us working together. I like us moving together forward and really understanding and diving a little bit deeper into this. So let's figure this out together.
Okay, just before I pass it to Councillor Wright for final words, yes, I very much support this. I believe there's a lot of smart and passionate people that want this to happen and make it move forward. So I'm confident that we'll be able to find a win-win-win solution for everyone moving forward. and excited to be part of the consultations and hear about what we ultimately come up with to do. Councillor Wright, up to you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yes, at this point, I'd just like to see what Lower Thames has to offer, and we move forward from there. Take their option, look at it, look at their other options, and start moving forward with something. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll put it to vote.
Just a point of order, Mayor Caniff, as we're voting, the bracket options full and partial, that's in number 2. I would also like to be shown in number 3. So the options for full and part recovery.
And Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
And Councillor Story?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
We'll move on to item 17, Chief Administrative Office.
17A, 55 Croydon Street, Chatham, demolition.
Councillor Jubenville and Councillor Allen, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
I so move.
Happy to put on the floor.
Councillor Jubenville?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really have a specific question. I've been contacted by numerous constituents, and I just thought maybe we could just provide some clarification. I think there's a misconception that this specific direction to administration pertains to Indwell. So I just want public transparency that this doesn't really have anything to do with Indwell, and basically is just regarding the demolition of the building. So just looking for clarification on that. And maybe you could also add on when you think maybe it's coming back to council again with further information. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dubin, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I can take that. So thank you for the question. I figured that was a question you would get. This has absolutely nothing to do with Indwell. I think the report is very clear that the reason why staff are recommending demolition, A, cost, which is an important factor, but also upon further review, it's pretty clear that the value of the gymnasium isn't what we thought it was. This is not, there hasn't been any agreement with Indwell. This has nothing to do with Indwell. We will be bringing back a report for council identifying properties that we have available and asking for council direction on where you would like us to consider supportive housing. So this will be one of the properties for you to consider, obviously, but it has nothing to do with the demolition. So we will be very transparent about supportive housing like we are with everything, and council ultimately will decide whether you want to partner with Indwell, what piece of property you want to consider. So those reports will be coming back in due course. Hopefully that helps, Councillor.
Yes, that's good. Like I said, I think there's just some misconceptions. A lot of people don't read the report, so they don't really understand. So I just thought, let's put it out there. That way everybody knows what this specific report is about. So that was it. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Story?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Well, item 18, Development Services.
18A, Bloomfield Business Park, repurchase of 3 properties.
Councillor Scacchi?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I had a very detailed email come in just prior to council, and I didn't have the opportunity to review the questions with the CAO as well as Mr. McFadden. So I was just hoping I could make a motion to defer this report.
Okay, can I get a second for that? Councillor Finn? Councillor Scacchi, go ahead.
That's it. I just the email I got was very articulated and it was very detailed, and I thought it was from one of the business owners, so I thought it was important that we have an opportunity to ask those questions in advance.
You're looking at postpone for
just the next meeting. Yeah,
okay.
That's all. Yeah.
Any other questions regarding that?
Yeah, Your Worship, I can advise that there's no staff are fully supportive of the deferral. There's nothing from a timeliness perspective that means it needs to be passed today. So if we'll have a fuller version of the situation available to us and the property owners 2 weeks from now, that's fine. So we're fine with the request for deferral.
Okay, any other questions regarding that? We'll put it to vote.
Councillor Thompson?
Yep.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Story?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
We'll move on to notices of motion. Councillor Sakachi.
I, Councillor Anthony Sakachi, here provide notice. I'll be bringing the following motion for voting discussion on the next meeting of council. Whereas currently there are over 410 kilometers of sidewalks within Chatham-Kent, and whereas winter control is a blend of services provided by the municipality and the expectations of homeowners regarding winter control salt services, be it resolved that administration bring a business case to the 2026 budget update with current best practices employed by other municipalities and the costs associated with altering the current service level.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you. I, Councillor Brock McGregor, hereby give notice I'll bring forward the following motion at the next council meeting that the CAO's office return to council with an information report following the hiring of the deputy CAO outlining new EMT alignment and subsequent financial savings. Thank you.
We'll move on to communication items. Councillor C. McGregor and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to move the communication items?
Certainly.
Seconded.
Okay, Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Ken. Sorry, I had a motion, but I thought I emailed it to Judy earlier, but I was out of town. You know, I'll just leave it to the next meeting because we'll just keep to the process.
Perfect, okay. Seeing no other questions, anyone opposed to the communication items? Seeing none, that passes. Non-agenda business. Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that the South Point Stars U11BB girls hockey team made history on the weekend as the first Stars team to win the International Silver Stick Women's Hockey Tournament. There's 5 girls from Chatham-Kent on that team, along with 9 other ones from Amherstburg all the way to Dresden. So congratulations to them and bringing home the first ever Silver Stick to this area.
Councillor McGrail?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to Audrey Ansel, which she's not here tonight, but Roma. We had a really awesome shout out from Minister Thompson when you were at Roma, and it was to Audrey and her team. I believe it was, you guys were in Niagara Falls, and they presented a project that they did where we went to other places and invited them to come to Chatham-Kent. And she was so impressed with us that we had a really good shout out in the main forum. So thank you, Audrey.
Audrey and team, thank you very much, yes. I've got a couple quick things. I see I just want to make you aware of an OBCM motion that was put forward, sent to the province, that we came up with this Friday. It'll be in the communication package for next meeting. But basically what it is any communities that has been serviced by OPP got a government grant to offset some of the costs. And with the OPP, they kind of set the trend. They publicly state that they're going to be the highest paid police force in the province. So OBCM got together and said, well, that's great that you got some money, but it's only fair that if we have our own police service like Chatham-Kent does and every other community in the OBCM, we said we want to be treated fairly. So it's basically a request to ask for money to say, help make us whole with what they've done for all the other communities. So that's a motion that was put forward there. And I just want to talk a little bit about tariffs. Everyone's heard that and what's going on and just what was announced about steel and aluminum. Tariffs are going to impact our community significantly. With aluminum, we have aluminum manufacturer right here in Chatham-Kent. If it gets spread out to other things, we have agriculture, we have automotive. It's going to be some significant impacts. So I just want to make sure that as we move forward, I sit on a group of mayors that for the border mayors, I sit on the OBCM. Every group that I sit on, that certainly rose right to the top of concerns and issues. And what is it we can do as communities, as individuals? Well, I mean, the one big thing that we're hearing, and it's certainly always supported this, shop Canadian, shop Ontario, shop local. And that's when you're at the grocery store. I see grocery stores now putting Canadian flags on items that are Canadian made, Canadian produced. So I just encourage everyone, when you're out there, if you have a choice, make sure that you shop Canadian. So that note. Anything else? Oh. Councillor C. McGregor.
Just on what you had said about shopping local, just for interest's sake out there, if anybody has an iPhone or even an Android, if you go into the apps, there are a number of new applications out there that are Shop Canadian, and simply you use your scanner, your camera, and you can scan the barcode, and it'll tell you exactly where your products are being made if you can't quickly find it on site. So easy apps to download and use.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the reading of the bylaws. First and second, Councillor Allen and Councillor Bondi. Can you move this, please?
That's you.
Happy to move it.
And seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Story and Councillor Doyle, can I get you to move the third and final reading, please?
Happy to second that.
Okay, anyone opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Hall, I'll pass over you to wrap it up, and Councillor Wright, look for your second.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, February 24th, 2025, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
And I'll second that. Thank you.
Anyone opposed to wrapping out 8:09? See none? Have a great night, everyone. I know.